Legacy. Have you ever wondered what you're going to leave behind once you're gone? Have you ever wondered where you fit in amidst your family or your business or your career? Today's guest, that's what we talk about, legacy. We talk about continuing to learn and continuing to work the problem. We talk about how bad decisions turn into great opportunities. Got an exciting guest today who's a third-generation business owner, and he's got a great story. Welcome to the Socks and Soul podcast. We're glad to have you. Let's get into it. Welcome back to the Socks and Soul podcast. My guest today is my good friend, Jason Hainsworth from the Hainsworth Laundry Company. I've known Jason for over 10 years. We do a number of things together. We water ski together, and we've known each other for quite a while. Jason works in his family business. I'm excited to have this conversation with Jason because he's going to bring a unique perspective to the family business story. He is an entrepreneur at heart and has a really great story about his family business and how he ended up in it and his role in it. Jason, thank you for joining us today. So tell us, why don't you start off and tell us just kind of the quick history of the Hainsworth Laundry Company and, you know, your dad's role in its founding and kind of where you guys have grown to today.
So in the early 60s, my dad took a job here in Spokane, and he was working for Maytag. And he, at the time, wanted an opportunity for my grandfather. My grandfather was already at retirement age, but he didn't really want to slow down. He needed a little bit of an income. So my dad found a route that was for sale. I think it was called Spokane Washer was the original owner of the route here. And so they bought that route, and my grandfather came and just something to do to run out of his garage. And so in I think 1964 is when my grandfather moved here. He was already 67 years old, and he was running the business essentially out of his very small one-car garage and his kitchen table. So they would buy older machines, washing machines and dryers, and put these mark time meters. They're these kind of old type of coin meter, and they would most machines start for a dime.
So these are your coin-op machines, yes, of old.
So basically. It was essentially a regular machine, but it had this separate meter, and it's the kind of thing where you stuck the quarter in and turned the crank, and so it was just whatever he could buy fairly cheap. He'd put it in, and then he would make deals with the apartment owners to pay them a certain percentage of the income. So
he supplied the machines, contracted with these apartment complexes, and then paid them basically for the space.
And so I have some memories when I was young of my grandparents in the evening counting coin and rolling coin on their kitchen table. My grandparents lived essentially kitty corner from us. We lived up a kind of a long driveway up a hill, but you'd go down the driveway and you'd go across kitty corner, and that was my grandfather's house. I don't even really remember it before we built the office behind his house, but before that, when I was younger, it didn't have an office built, but we did build an office and a shop at some point behind my grandfather's house. And we also built a shop on our house. So it was basically a large 2-car garage and a workbench area. Mm-hmm. And that was our operation. I think we rented some warehouse space. But in the very early days, my grandfather had been a salesman most of his life. Ran a place called Black Frost Appliance in Portland, Oregon, before he moved here to Spokane. My dad grew up in Portland. And it was just, he'd been in the business a little bit. He liked to tinker around. He knew how to sell. He was always a bit of an inventor. My grandfather claimed to have invented a automatic transmission back in the 20s, but didn't have any money to get it patented or marketed, and several other things. He invented an automatic vent cleaner in his 80s and was marketing that into his 90s. I have a picture of him. He's probably 89 years old, and he's fully on top of a laundromat roof, demonstrating his invention,
his venting invention.
Yes, and so that
right out of the
kind of
gate,
ran in the family.
I mean, right out of the gate, you got this grandfather who's just got this legacy of, just working till, at 67, he starts this new business.
Yeah, in fact, my grandfather left home when he was 16. He homesteaded Twin Falls, Idaho, on a horse, plowing the first main street of Twin Falls, Idaho. And there's things in his journal about riding a team down into the Snake River Canyon. If you've ever been to Twin Falls, it's very steep. And he was 14 years old. He's leading a team of horses. And so it was interesting, kind of seeing this true spirit of entrepreneurship that was in my grandfather. And then my dad also, he eventually got too busy. My grandfather got too busy, and my dad started working, and my dad it was frustrating for him. He'd always been an excellent salesman, but they would shrink his territory and up his quota.
Right. Yep.
and they
decided he was making too much.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
and he wasn't tall, and they always said that short people couldn't sell. Of course, that wasn't true, and he was an excellent salesperson, but he was always kind of up against it. And finally what happened is he had a supervisor that kind of tried to keep covering his rear end, and that guy kind of made it sound like my dad was the problem. And so they finally let my dad go, and a couple of years later they found out that it was this guy that was the one that was the issue. And but rather than kind of starting another job, he decided to kind of come into the business with my grandfather. There was a lot of opportunity.
How old was your dad at this time?
He was already in his 40s.
So he's already had
had experience.
He got a career going.
Yeah, and he'd won a lot of awards for his sales.
What was he selling? What industry?
He sold appliances.
He did. Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm.
So he worked for Westinghouse and Maytag, and he would sell to stores.
So, and I presume this was kind of part of the fact that your grandfather was also kind of in the appliance business.
Yeah, I think that's what probably got it into.
Okay.
How he got into it, and
so he brought industry knowledge.
Yes.
Into the family business with his dad.
And my dad was a very energetic and an excellent salesperson. He knew how to close a sale, and it consumed his mind all of the time. I think later in life, Dad worked into his 80s until his health wouldn't allow it. But later in life, he just wanted to go out and fix machines, and we would try to find out why he didn't want to go sell, because that was his talent. That's what he was really good at. And it turns out that fixing machines was a lot less taxing on him, even though it was physically taxing. It didn't make him stay awake at night. When he was selling, he was always laying awake at night. How do I get this deal? Or why did I lose this one? And it just, he couldn't rest knowing that there was something undone. And so it's very interesting to understand that mindset, that relentless kind of true 24/7 worrying about your business, worrying about what you're going to do, how you're going to make things work. And even though he had gotten long past that point of knowing we were going to make it, he still worried, and it still kept him up at night, thinking about, how can I do it better? What's the approach I should take? Am I missing something? So it's really an amazing legacy. Both my grandfather, who was in his own right a very accomplished person, who went from not having a high school education to having a very successful life, to my father, who really I think of as very self-made, in the sense that he went out and grabbed the business. Nothing came to him. He was in my younger years. He was on the road all the time, and I remember him getting in late, and especially when I was a teenager, there was always, and I would borrow his car to go to school in the morning. I was lucky if there was any gas in it. He always drove it right down to E. He knew how to time it, and so that was my experience. Was somebody that was willing to put in the hours and do what it takes to make things work.
Never assumed it was going to come easily. Always put the shoulder to the grindstone, as it were, and and set the example for you and your siblings on what it took, to run a business.
Yeah, and I think what happens is that everybody has different strengths. So my second brother, Lauren, was interested in kind of all of the physical aspect of the business of the installations and the equipment ordering and figuring all that stuff out. And he got into the business. He actually left college because he's like, I'm ready. I know what I want to do.
He's an operations guy.
Yeah, and he basically became the guy that made sure that things flowed well.
Sure.
And so he's been doing that since full-time since 1978.
He's a couple years older than you.
Yeah, he's a little bit. Yeah, he's a little bit older. And he's got this amazing knowledge and understanding, but he's not the type that wants to go out and sell.
Okay.
And so you have to kind of find your spot and know what it is that you need to do. And as I came into the business, my uncle was retiring. He was a partner. He had kind of run the financial side, and that was my role to kind of come in and do that and help in some of the sales. And I found that what I enjoyed after I got my feet wet is kind of just understanding what it took to run the whole business.
Because growing up, you worked in the business as a youngster doing kind of some of the, more of the grunt work, if you will,
For sure.
moving stuff around, counting coins.
Yes.
And so you had kind of decided early on that maybe this wasn't the direction you were going to go. And you had kind of decided later, right, that you would kind of join.
Yeah, I mean, I think
business.
like most teenagers, you want to leave town. It just doesn't seem that interesting or exciting to be in your hometown. And so you want to leave, you want to go somewhere else, you want to do something else. And
you didn't want to sell washing machines the rest of your life?
and
it just didn't sound that glorious.
So like, I think what that was that, we just have this need to define our own way. But what I found was I had a little bit of my dad in me where I didn't really particularly want to work for other people. And I knew that ultimately, if you could do your own thing, it was the best way. It's not easy. And I think really it took a number of years really working in the business to realize how difficult it is. You don't always see that right away. You inherit a bit of stability that my father and grandfather didn't have. But by the time I was around, I had. And so you have to kind of come to an understanding of what it took to get there. And that took me some time. I would say that right away, I probably took things for granted. I just thought, hey, things kind of run themselves. We just, do this and that and everything will be great.
Growing up, did you sense the volatility of the small business,
Yeah.
I mean, you saw that from your dad's perspective.
Yes.
So you did sense that, but then when you came back to the business, it felt more stable.
Yeah, I think it would be things like my mom would say, well, Dad says that I can't, buy anything this week, and I didn't understand cash flow at the time.
I don't think teenagers ever do.
Right. So it was interesting to kind of understand that usually that just meant there's a lot of expenses. We got to wait a few minutes for the cash to come in, so we have a little bit to bank on. And I just think, it was running well when I got here. Things were working fine, but after a while, what I saw was we were kind of running a cash cow, and that sounds like a great thing, something that just is producing money.
Right. We created this thing, and
just
it's
go
the
milk
golden
it,
goose.
right?
Yep. Just keep rolling.
But there really is a truth that if you're not growing, you die. There's kind of that's a saying in business. And it doesn't always have to be revenue growth, but if you're not changing, adapting, growing in some way, you can't survive, because everything gets more expensive. The machines we buy are more expensive. The labor that we pay is more expensive.
The rules keep changing.
The rules change. Mm-hmm. The environment that we're in demands that you have to adapt, or you're going to get swept up. In our industry, a lot of the other companies went to what I would say, the sellout. And because a lot of them were owned by a single person, they got to retirement age, they cashed out, mm-hmm. and they sold to a larger company. And it was consolidating. And all of a sudden now you have really well-funded large companies that you're competing against instead of just one or two kind of other local guys.
It changes the game dramatically when the guy that you're competing with has seemingly unlimited capital.
Yeah, and then it's not just that, it's resources.
Yeah.
The quality of their presentations, of their website, which wasn't really an issue back then, but now is, of course. What it looks like to people, how professionally they look. And so we had to go about a process of essentially professionalizing in our business just to be able to compete. And I think what I found was to be able to survive from the third into the fourth and maybe fifth generation, what was required was a lot more deliberate action. So I couldn't just kind of wing it anymore and kind of go on my gut and on my experience. I've learned that you have to be constantly learning and getting help on figuring out things that you didn't understand before. And there's things that you learn maybe in business school, but that's been a while. And it really wasn't something you really internalized when you're 22. And so really saying, hey, I've got to keep improving. I basically have to go back to school. And it's not really a formal thing, but you're learning all of the time how to improve. I became, about 3 years ago, I joined Vistage, which is a network of small business CEOs and executives that we get together once a month and we work on the business rather than in it. And we talk about very freely our challenges and the difficulties that we have. And we learn from great resources, speakers, and we have a chair that helps us to know that we're, they provide coaching and they give us advice and help when we ask for it. And then there's accountability. We have to show what we're doing to improve and make progress in our business. And so that's been an eye-opener for me. And I remember feeling like I was drinking from the fire hose at first. And now I feel like I can take things in, get the help I need to implement, and we're making really great progress in becoming a better company, more professional, something that can stand up to scrutiny, and not just rely on really great people. We've always relied on really good people, but when you grow, you can't do that the same way. You have to learn how to train and how to use the resources of the people you have. So, that's been kind of a journey from, hey, I'm taking, I get to come and do this fun thing, and I get to, be here closer to my family, and be part of this, to, hey, man, this is a big responsibility. And if I don't step up and learn and improve and understand what needs to be done, this could go extinct.
You got, it's an interesting dynamic to compare, what your grandfather did, where it was just, the quintessential me and my garage and my kitchen table providing for my wife and my children. And then it passes to the next generation. And then by the time you are in the driver's seat, not only do you have a bunch of your family invested in it, but now you guys have quite a few employees whose families are invested in it. And to come in, it's different than if you were just an outside hire where you're not related to these people, or these people didn't work with you and your family. I mean, it's an interesting thing in a family business, because employees aren't just employees. It's like they become kind of part of this community that you have built. And so your responsibility on that is heavy.
And I would say too, that part of that is that our name is in the company. And, there's times where I wish it weren't so. Uh-huh. It's not real original or anything else, but what it does is it's a reminder to you that when you have people working for you, they're taking your name around, and they also get to become a bit of a family. Our longtime people, when they go through hard things, or when they have their triumphs and everything that happens in their lives, we get to be a part of that. And because they're important to us, it's different than a policy sometimes. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's what's the right thing to do for this person, and how much do they mean to us. And oftentimes we look to be creative so that we can make sure that our people can continue to be part of what we do. But also at the same point, you're growing, and you have to realize that people aren't going to stay forever. And you can't just hope that they get enough knowledge by being around. So you have to do things like train and write things down and come up with procedures. And there's a whole list of things that a lot of businesses don't end up doing. They just kind of count on the fact that 2 or 3 people really know what's going on. And if those people are pulled out or removed for a time, things just crumble. Mm-hmm. And I've come to the conclusion that you can't live like that. You've got to delegate. You have to elevate. You have to find places that people are going to contribute and how they're going to grow. If they're not finding growth, they'll move on. Your best people will move on. And so how do they grow as part of their employment? And how do you train people that might even leave you? I think of great college basketball programs, and I think, okay, what made them good? Well, they started developing so much talent that they were leaving early and leaving for the NBA. And you think, well, that's bad, because here they're putting all this effort into recruiting a player, and he leaves after 2 years or 1 year. But then what you learn when you develop people is that that's a place people want to come. Mm-hmm. And so you're going to have opportunities, even if people leave, to make sure that you're always getting good people. And that's the philosophy I've taken. You take care of your veterans that want to be there, that love it, and you train your new people so that they either want to stay, or if they go somewhere else, they have nothing but good things to report, and it becomes a place where people want to be. So that's been part of my development, and really understanding, instead of a scarcity mentality around people, is a growth mindset. Mm-hmm. We need a growth mindset in our company, a growth mindset around our people. And if we do that, then it'll be a place people want to be.
What would you say were some of the big, that's a really important shift. And you look at family businesses, and you don't always have a very smooth transition generation to generation, or you have siblings that are fighting over things. And so, they end up selling or buying each other out or going away. For you, when you talk about, taking this cash cow and turning it into legacy and looking long term, what were the experiences, or what were the moments when you kind of learned these lessons that have brought you to this point?
I think just there's something, I just recently, I guess it's been 3 years now, my brother got sick and died of cancer. And he was really at the time the only sibling that wasn't working in the business.
How many siblings do you have?
I have 6 siblings, but he was a shareholder. We're all shareholders. And when I saw what that looked like in the transition, and it was just kind of this poof and it was gone. There was a buyout, but everything just got absorbed, and it seemed just so small, I guess. And
when you say small, you mean compared to,
like it's this thing that's been built, and then, in a few months of kind of sorting out the numbers and everything, there's this buyout. It's his wife got some money, but then it's all gone, and I think what I saw from that is that things are temporary. You've got to plan for what it's going to look like when you're not around, and you've got to say, what is this going to look like if that happens to somebody else that's a key and integral part of the business? What if something happens to one of our key people that has this great store of knowledge, but they haven't really shared it? They've never written it down. They don't have a procedure. They just kind of know what they're doing. And I feel like I started to really understand that you can't just assume everything's going to stay the same.
This is where you're talking about delegating and elevating, and the importance of, you run the whole company out of your head. Well, what if something happens to your head? How many people no longer have the job they used to have because of that? Yeah,
and the institutional knowledge that oftentimes just resides in one person's head in small business, I think it's a real issue. It's going great, and then something happens to one key person, and all of a sudden you're unable to function. You haven't taught people the thinking that's required to do the job. They have a function that they're performing, but they don't know why, and they don't know kind of what goes behind it. And I think that happens so often. People are technicians that essentially start a business. They say, well, I'm a plumber. I'm a good plumber. I've been working for somebody else. I want to start my plumbing business. But what they don't realize is there's so many other things that go into it. And so you've got to be able to understand all of the parts of what make your business work. If you've got somebody that's doing the books, and it's like they've been the same person that's always done the books, and they go somewhere else, and you've never written any of it down, all of a sudden you might be out of business, even though you're still doing your plumbing or doing what it is that you do and know how to do. You can't function anymore. And so that's the thing that I think so many small businesses go wrong, is that they rely too much on what's in somebody's head. And in a family thing, it could be even worse, I think.
Oh, absolutely, man. But just really interesting things to have to think about, and as you came back into the business, making these realizations as you went along. The thing that strikes me, Jason, is it seems like it could have been really easy for you to just come back in the business, just keep doing what dad and grandpa did, and and kind of continue to milk it. And it would have changed a lot in terms of, the economy and the businesses, that are doing that could have progressed, and you guys could have just kind of stayed doing the same thing. But you and your family took this conscious approach to, modernized, you rebranded, getting these systems in places. And how, as you look forward in the future and think about the legacy that you're leaving behind, how do you feel about where the components are and doing that now?
I think we're putting the systems into place to be able to keep going down the road. And it's things like having key performance indicators that you very much understand and you track. It's having a really good understanding of your books and what's your position, what's your cash position, what's your debt position, what's your strength, what's your margin, what kind of margin are you making? Is it sustainable? How are you basically looking at the future as far as succession? Do you have a plan in place that will allow somebody to retire? Or what happens if somebody passes away or becomes incapacitated? And so what I feel like is that we're on the road. We've got a lot to do, but we're now having these conversations, and that's the progress. There's accountability. The conversations have started. There's a place where we have to come to and say, did it happen or not? Okay, if it didn't, where do we go next? And so you're never really at a finished product. You're always just learning. And part of it is, what is it that you have to learn that you didn't need to learn 5 years ago, but now you do? What is I think of here in the state of Washington, our minimum wage is gone way up. Mm-hmm. And so it's driven our employment costs through the roof. And we've expanded where now at least half of our operation is in Seattle area, where it's very expensive to live. The wages are very inflated, and they need to be for people to live. And so the calculus really changes. What used to be a deal you could make back in Spokane 15 years ago is now going to lose you money.
Right.
And so if you don't have a good grasp of those things, you can go out of business.
Sure.
It's just, one deal at a time. It's slow. It's death by 1,000 cuts. But if you're not really on top of it and understanding what your business is, it's a thin line. Mm-hmm. I think that's, if I had a message for people that maybe are considering going into business for themselves, or are thinking that these people that own businesses have got it great, they're just living fat and happy. I think what I would say is that the line is thin, and we've seen it during this pandemic of places that have thrived for years and been great businesses
for decades.
Yes, and yep. they're going out of business because the line is thin.
Yeah,
and
6 weeks of shutdown.
Yes, and so that's been a real eye opener for me.
So, last two questions I would ask you. What would you say has been your biggest failure in your business, your part of it? And what would you say has been your best success in your business? And And what lesson, what lesson would you share with our listeners from those two experiences?
Well, I'd like to maybe tie those things together. So a number of years ago, it was about 10 or 11 years ago now, probably 11, we got into a business that was ancillary. It was kind of a vertical integration, but not one that we needed. And it was, we bought a distributorship, a Maytag distributorship in Seattle. And I think we underestimated the cost of doing business there and overestimated the market, underestimated the competition. We're not really in that business. And we just thought that it would just be something we could buy and it would work great. And what we found was it never made any sense. We were losing money. And we were operating on, and we didn't have a way to know how we were going to start making money on this. It was a bit of a sunk cost. There was really nothing we could do about it, but we wanted to figure something out. And what was interesting was this led to some discussions. We'd never really competed in Puget Sound region in our business, the route business, because there was a lot of competition, well established. But when we got over there in this other business, which was basically selling laundry equipment to laundromats and other people, so we were essentially a buyer from that type of business. So what we found was our business over there was being underserved. There had been a large consolidation, and the national competitors had bought up everybody that had created previously this really great, robust competition in the region. And people thought there were really no other options. And so as we looked to kind of figure out what to do with this thing that we'd bought, this albatross, we were introduced to someone that had been a salesman for his family business that had been purchased out about 10 years previously. And he had signed a non-compete, and he was kind of staying in the arena, but he was working in carpet. And so one of our customers that we'd worked with over here, who was headquarters over there, gave a name. We started talking and realized, here's a guy we could hire. He's got a lot of contacts, and he knows this market. Maybe we ought to get into our business in this new area. We had probably 15 or 20 accounts there, which is a really small number. A very small, like 1 day route. It would be, for us, which would be a very, very small number of machines. And so we had a little bit of a start, but we just started kind of building that business over there. My nephew joined us, and he had a lot of acumen in running things. We had somebody that knew how to sell in that region. And so I think what's happened is we took this failure and built something. And now that the Seattle region accounts for more than half of our revenue, and ever more every year, it's a growth area for us. We went from probably a few hundred machines to about 9,000 machines in that region in 10 years.
Wow.
We've almost tripled our gross income since 2010. It hasn't been easy, but what's happened is it gave us the growth we needed to become and the space that we've needed to become more professional. So when we were not operating in that market, we could kind of do it the way we'd done, and we were okay. There wasn't a lot of opportunity for growth, but we didn't have to do much either. And so by taking all this on, doing all this extra work, it has led us to have to become better. And so even though it's been a very difficult process and expensive and, the kind of thing that makes you pull your hair out sometimes, it has really helped us to grow and I think become that much stronger. And I've just been really grateful for a little bit of an accidental opportunity. I think that happens in life sometimes. You do things, you think it's going to work out, and oftentimes you have to kind of turn the coin over and see what's on the other side to see the real opportunity. So yeah, I think in this case, I think our biggest failure essentially from a decision-making standpoint actually has led us to really our greatest opportunity.
It's such a great lesson. And it as you were talking about, taking that, that decision to buy that company and turning into something that has become a great asset to your business. It just reminds me of, in life, starting and doing. So much of entrepreneurism success is doing, is going and just making it happen, finding out a way to make it work. And, when you take a problem, or an issue or a scenario, be it in business or with your family or whatever, and you don't think about failure being an option to that, you just work the problem. And it sounds like that's what you guys did. You just took this thing and, you thought there was opportunity there. Maybe it wasn't exactly what you had envisioned because that's not really the business you're in, but you just worked it until you found the solution to it.
Yes, I think inaction is essentially our greatest enemy.
Oh man, it's a great line.
Yeah. So, but on the other hand, good decision making is something you can measure, and it's something I've really learned. I think at the time, well, I'm sure of it actually, that I was going on gut. I was thinking, hey, this might be something that might work. I had no numbers. I had no idea really what it meant. And for real success that's going to last, you need to know your numbers. And it, like I say, we could have gotten to the same conclusion that we came to a different way that was maybe less expensive and where we hadn't, felt like we made a poor decision, and that would have been better. But you make decisions and then you've got to do something. And I think, the lesson I've learned is make a decision and then do it. But better yet, know why you're doing it. Understand what you have to gain, what you have to lose, and then go and make it happen.
And it's always a fine line, right? It's like, one of the things that I struggle with is I tend to overanalyze everything. And so I get caught up in the inaction part of it because I'm like, I got to know everything about it completely before I can even take a step into doing it. And in that process, sometimes I put myself in a position where I get nothing done, where Annie's the opposite. She's like, that looks good. I'm just going to go get started on it. And so
I think you need
figuring out that balance is important.
I think like what I've found is that you have to have somebody who's the big thinker and somebody that's the doer.
Yeah.
And if you're both of those people, that's great. But, I'm more of a big picture thinker. And then, especially my nephew, Nathan, who's a big part of our business, he is a doer. He just jumps in and it's like, okay, that was done. It's this afternoon. It's going to take me 6 months, and he's done it this afternoon.
I think we should.
And he's like, all right, it's done. And so if you can, you need to surround yourself. I think most people that become entrepreneurs are actually big picture thinkers. They're idealists. They're people that are thinking about the top of the mountain, and they've got this path, but they haven't really, they're not always the ones that are staking out the next steps.
Right. They're not grading the road to get there.
No.
They're just saying that's where we're headed.
I'm going.
Yeah.
And so if you're the other type, I think you got to find somebody that can give you vision. So, the thing I've learned is you need a visionary to kind of show the big picture and to come up with big ideas and hey, we need to think about this differently, and we could try this different thing. And then you need somebody that will say, let's talk about real here. And as part of that, be ready to make the steps and to push it forward. And so we've been really fortunate to have that great combination. And I think that is, for anybody that's thinking of getting started, think about that. Who is going to drive it forward? Who's going to see where it needs to go? And it doesn't have to be somebody necessarily actively working in the business. It could be a spouse or somebody that they can say, hey, you know what, you might want to think about this, or somebody that a little bit of check and balance, so that you don't just start walking without a path, or that you have this great idea but you can't figure out how to get there. So I think that might be the biggest lesson I've learned, is getting people that can help you. I think that the thing I've found is that there's always people willing to help. If you're willing to make relationships, if you're open with people, you will get all the help you'll ever need, because people love to see other people succeeding, and they have resources that the resources are endless. We just need to know where to access them. And a lot of that is energy, it's ideas, sometimes it's capital. Sure. But those things are available to people. And I just think that if you've got enough energy and ideas, if you've got a plan, you can make it happen. So I've been
wisdom in many advisors.
Yeah, there is. And I mean, ultimately you make your own decision.
Sure. But
knowing where you're weak and being willing to get some really good advice and get people that are willing to tell you the truth, man, it's fantastic.
Yeah. Some honest advisors. Yes. Don't tell me what I want to hear. Tell me what I need to hear. Yeah, absolutely. I want you to tell one more story. It was either you or maybe your brother. Somebody once told me the story when your dad and grandpa used to come with bags of coins, and I'm botching the story for sure, so you have to straighten me out. But they would drop the coins on the table, and they could hear if there was a certain kind of coin in there. Oh, yeah. Right? Oh, yeah. Because you guys would go clean out these laundry machines and have bags of coins, right?
Yeah. So essentially, we, especially in the early days, and even, we still do a lot of it now, but we process a lot of coin. Luckily, we've gone to other methods that are cleaner and cheaper and
less heavy.
Yeah, less heavy. But so we process a lot of coins where, we're talking about, taking anywhere between $25,000 to $60,000 worth of quarters to the bank. And they're, it's $1,000 is 50 pounds. So 50 pounds a bag, you just do the math, it's heavy. And we process a lot of coins, but, and you have these big noisy machines that you dump the coins and everything.
You dump them in, they count, and roll them, whatever. So
when you're dumping into this loud machine, there's a distinctive sound. Quarters make a distinctive sound. And silver quarters have a kind of a ting sound to them. And it's amazing that what can happen is as you're dumping a bag, you can hear a single quarter in a bag of maybe $700 and you can hear it in there and you'll stop everything and dig through and find it, because that silver quarter is worth a lot more than a quarter. And then you just toss in your own quarter. off of your own pile. Every once in a while, a little somebody gets a hold of their grandma's silver quarter collection, and they'll use several of them in machines, which is,
and those are worth how much?
I don't even know. It's always been, multiple values of whatever they're worth.
Sure.
So pre-1965, quarters were made of silver. Now it's an alloy. In 64, there's a bit of a mix, and then before that, I think it's like full silver. So, pretty much anyone who's ever counted coin has a personal silver quarter collection.
I was going to say, you guys probably have all like very unique, coins and quarters and.
Yeah. And then, like when they started coming out with the state quarters and stuff, I mean, it wouldn't take very long to get the whole group.
You got a bag of 1,000 quarters.
Exactly.
You got lots of subjects to choose from.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Now in our Seattle facility, we actually we pour quarters into bags that are attached to a pallet, and we'll put $50,000 worth of quarters in a pallet. Wow. And they'll pick up to 3 of those pallets up at once. So you just can imagine, $150,000 worth of quarters rolling out the door. It's a crazy
From a volume
thing.
standpoint, I mean that's a full pallet's worth.
Yeah,
of,
I mean you
50,
think about
000.
it, it's like, I don't know, whatever, like a standard pallet size is,
sure.
maybe 2.5 feet high. It's like kind of probably about a 2.5 foot square. It's amazing. So
it's like Scrooge McDuck's money bin rolling out the door.
Exactly. I mean,
and turns out, can you swim in quarters?
Probably. It's a little grimy though.
Yeah,
they're very, very
not
dirty.
Not recommended during the COVID days, especially.
No, yeah, I think. It's very dirty. We prefer a much cleaner form of cash nowadays, which, we've gone to more electronic payments and
sure.
trying to get people to pay with their phones
sure.
now.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. Our industry was called essentially coin op, and we've had to kind of rename that. It's self-serve laundry, I think is more appropriate. But
yeah.
Anyway, we were very fortunate. I would say, it's a business that's provided for a lot of families, and we've been just incredibly blessed. And I think of always those people that built that. When you remember where you come from, it's a lot easier to get a path forward.
Absolutely. Wow. Jason, thank you so much for joining me. You are a wealth of great information. I've always really enjoyed talking business and business strategy with you. I find your company that you and your family have built to just be really, really fascinating. You wouldn't think that the coin-op laundry business would be that interesting, but I find that your insights in business and strategy and your willingness to continue to learn and progress and not stand still, I think they're really, really important things for me to learn and for our listeners to learn. Just keep learning, like your grandpa did when he started the business after he'd basically finished a career he worked until the day he died, innovating and creating and inventing.
Yeah, and again, I think that we all have to learn. We have to keep learning. We have to keep growing. Business is interesting. I just love it.
Yeah.
I just love, for me, I don't care what kind of business it is. I love talking business. It's so interesting. I think no matter what industry you're in, it could be garbage, it could be high tech. There's stuff that's interesting about it.
You bet.
And I love, hearing about other people's ventures, because what you learn is business. There's some things that doesn't matter what industry you're in, you're going to have to deal with it. So I appreciate being able to talk about my own experience. I know it's just kind of a micro thing, but hopefully it's something that somebody else can learn from.
Absolutely. It's been great talking to you. I hope you have all enjoyed this episode. Thanks again to Jason. If you want to learn more about their company and their company profile, you could probably check out your website.
Hainsworthlaundry.com.
Hainsworthlaundry.com. Awesome. And you can reach out to Jason if you want to learn more about him and what he's done and how he's grown the business. I'm sure he would be interested. You can leave a comment below or reach out to him through the website. Jason, take care, man.
Thank you very much,
Thanks
Kelly.
for having us on.
Appreciate it.
You bet.